one of the really cool things to stop traps is to understand where the variability of your income is in your own personal situation. So are you self-employed that you can cut expenses or get another customer to help support your portfolio? Are you PAYG and you can do some overtime, get some bonuses, ask the boss for a promotion? Where is the variability? If the variability is 100% solely related on the property, in the upwards interest rate cycle is probably something you're going to have to consider and model out and take in account a way more interest rate increases, even though we don't know what's going to happen going forward, even though for the short term we're seeing them go up. You're just going to have to plan that a little bit more. So one of the big questions we always ask is, where's the variability in your income? Because if it's just the property, you have to be careful, versus if you've got lots of variability in income, it can be a little bit easier for you to play the game. The trap of the fixed rate is because you don't want to lose that nice low rate, but then you are pushing out your next purchase potentially because you don't have the deposits. The other traps I'm seeing is your personal circumstances. What's your living arrangements? Do you have a high owner-occupied debt versus renting? So that can come in to tap out your borrowing capacity as well. Personal debts, credit cards, personal loans, car loans, they tap out your lending. Like, pick on a credit card, the limit is used all the time. How many people come to me and go, oh, I don't owe anything on my credit card. Why does it have to be taken into account? Well, you can go out tomorrow and buy curtains and whatever for your house and max it out.
Yep.
So a lot of banks, some of them are using 33.8% per month of your credit card limit. Some are on 42, some are on, they're all varied buffers on those extra debts that are sitting in there. And if we're looking at borrowing capacity, and I've got a client that has car loans, personal loans, and all that stuff, we may need to target those ones to get rid of them to keep your borrowing capacity up. All right. The other one that's a bit of a trap, business debts. We heard in the last 2 years that we all got shut in our homes and stuff, and then when we come out, we get these opportunities to get 10-year loans, recovery loans, and cash flow loans, and all those things, which obviously are important for your specific goal. So if your goal is business and not necessarily property right now, that could be a great opportunity. But more and more, the business debts, the business cards, the chattel mortgages, the car finance, the equipment finance that you have, which may be necessary for different industries, is coming more and more onto the table as you wanting to do personal lending outside your business. And the other big trap I find, wrong lenders at the wrong time, or the lender, you need to sequence your lenders. So there's some lenders that are really cool with borrowing capacity, and then and they'll still lend to you straight away, but you probably should leave them for later on in your investment property journey than taking more restrictive lenders right now, where we can jump over the restrictive lender hurdle and we can keep the powder and the gun dry for when you want to take an opportunity for another property later on down the track.
Well, can we pause there? I'd love to unpack that one a little bit further, because I think that's particularly interesting. So you also, and please correct me on this because I don't know what I'm talking about here. This is something where I'd love to learn more than anything. In the idea that there's the big four banks and then there's second-tier lenders and there's third-tier lenders, right? What you're suggesting is, or again, correct me where I'm wrong, is that you really want to maximize what you can do with the big four, because as you start doing third or fourth-tier lenders, just using those types of lenders can affect your borrowing power. Where if you use those third or fourth-tier options too early, that could be something that could actually imperatively slow you down if not handled correctly. Is that what you're saying there, Aaron?
It's part of it. So to unpack that a little bit, we'll take the lender that I would go to in the more extreme, the last extreme. So if you've done all your borrowing capacity with using 3% buffers on your existing debt, whether held with a bank or not, you've got restrictions on rental yield caps, maybe at 7%, maybe at 6% with some of the lenders. You've maxed out, you capped out, you have to put your business financials down if you're a self-employed person versus looking at your director's wages that you might pay yourself, all that sort of stuff. When we go to these more not extreme lenders, I rephrase it, they are actually can be quite cheap to get lending with. is that you can put your full documentation down, pay slips, tax returns, whatever it is. And when you've got other people's debt, say you've got ANZ debt, CBA debt, NAB debt, when you go to this lender, if you paid $2,000 a month to your home loan over at ANZ, this lender will just take exactly $2,000 a month, which means that when they're servicing your new debt, the buffer associated with your old debt is lower. So the hurdle to get over is easier. But if you went to this lender first, they're doing your lending with the 3% buffer over the exact rate. And then if you go to that lender for another debt, they've got to consider their own debt the same way as if you were doing everything with the Big Four. So if you can if you can have all external debt to this lender will be able to keep you lending. But if you have all your debt with that lender, you're subject to the same restrictions you are with the with say more conservative. And then if you step it back, there's lenders that will take your actual repayment and put a small buffer on it. So if you pay $2,000, they'll consider it to $2,500, $2,700 versus $2,000. Then if you step it back even further, we've got a lender that does all the lending at all the normal buffers, but they just have a nice little way of saying, if I'm going to have to consider your new lending at, say, it's 5.5, so we have to buffer it at 8.5. So if we have to buffer it at 8.5, and you've got a lot of investment lending, and we're buffering that at 8.5 from other banks, they're going to allow you to have the interest deduction that we all love on our tax returns to be added back at 8.5. So if they're judging you at 8.5, they're going to give you the benefit of everything else at 8.5. So as you step back these lenders, you get different things. And the other little thing that I'm finding with professional property investors, which the banks will consider you at 3 or more properties, is that when you get up to 3 or 4 properties, they're asking for your individual tax return. And at the back of your tax return, you've got address, you've got income, and you've got expenses. And what the banks are doing in the main is that they're looking at those expenses. They're taking the interest, they're taking total expenses minus the interest, minus the depreciation that you get from your tax depreciation schedule. Highly recommend getting that, by the way. And they take off your, we were talking before, Charlie, about how many doors you're replacing in your houses. Take off once off expenses, and they are looking at your actual costs of holding that property. And if you've got really big fees in that, you could have your rent at $500 a week, but your expenses well exceed that, like strata and other things. So the banks are actually looking at your expenses. So to look at the borrowing capacity, so we've got banks that will look at all your expenses and scrutinize it down to line item. And then we've got banks that say, oh, we're only taking 80% of the rent, so we don't care about the expenses.
All right. So what you're saying here, Aaron, is that it's not only just the difference between lenders from, let's say, Big Four right down to third and fourth and probably fifth tier lenders that have these differentials in how they assess your borrowing capacity, but also the timing, what they're willing to do month on month changes.
Yep.
That's right.
And how they're looking at things. So, for example, and I don't know if this is true or not, but let's pretend in this case here, you've got NAB, and you know what? They're looking at things in a certain way. They're not really digging too deep. And then all of a sudden they go, do you know what? We need to change our lending policy here. The month rolls over, and then all of a sudden they want personal tax returns. They want to look at every line item. They want to see how many doors Charlie replaces, and then question why he isn't starting a door replacement company with all this work he's able to generate.
I'm an investor. Let's go.
It's a curious topic for another time. What are people doing to these doors, Grant? What are people doing to these doors?
You could lock that in.
All right, fellow property investor. If you loved the value from this short video and wanted to know more about how you can win at property investing, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now. Alternatively, click subscribe and you'll never miss another one of these videos.